Right, let's move on to another issue. The English language. You know, it's a fickle thing, and I'm always been fascinated in political campaigning about the words we use, and this is where my next guest excels. Veteran journalist and radio broadcaster Kel Richards is a master of words and their meanings. As I said, I've been alive to the way words are used to frame debates in politics. It can make or break campaigns, and we can see it turfs MPs out of office. So each Wednesday now, I've asked Kel to join me to have a bit of a chat and pull apart some of the word weapons of choice in political races here and overseas. He joins me now from Sydney. Kel, thank you for your time. I think this is so important because language is used to attack or to affirm political theories and political points, point scoring in particular. Let's start with political framing. Conservative, progressive and moderate. Now, these words are used all the time now. Some of them are only relatively recent. I don't think some of them even hold their old meanings anymore. I'd argue the word conservative now is almost a pejorative. But of course, conservatives, by the very essence of the word, they think there are things in life, in society, that are worth conserving. They're not against change. They just want to see the case made for change before we junk values and institutions that have stood the test of time. What's your view on the word conservative and how it's used today?
Okay, the core meaning, it came into English in the 14th century from a Latin source via French, blame the Normans in 1066, and the core meaning is preserve. The idea of preserving something. So the central idea, in about the 1830s, it became a political term, using it pretty much the way we know it these days. The idea of preservation is at the heart of that. So politically, conservatives are people who saw themselves as being part of a chain of being. There are all these generations that have come up to here. There are generations that will follow me. My task is to preserve what is good that's been handed on to me and to pass it on to the next generations. That's the central idea of conservatism. Interestingly, in Australia, it is not a positive word. Look at Corey Bernardi's experience when he started Australian Conservatives. It didn't bite at any point. Now, I don't understand why the word conservative doesn't work here when it works in Britain and it works in Canada, but that's the idea. But it just doesn't seem to have the same political bite in Australia.
I don't think it's because it's ever been properly explained, to be honest. And I don't think people understand the role of centre-right political parties in that continuum of time that you talked about there, of values being continued and institutions being continued through the life cycle of generations. The other side, the left, tend to want to junk things and turn them over and throw them into government, but the left, more power, the right, more power to the individual. Progressive is another word. Now, I don't like the word progressive because I think the progressive agenda, so-called, on the left is anything but progressive. But the left are really quick to understand the power of language, and this is a word they now own as a positive, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And why they've made it sound positive, I don't know. It's just clever spin, I suppose. Again, it comes from the 14th century, so a very old word, and the core idea is the idea of moving. So it's moving. Now, it's moving forward was the idea in the original classical Latin word that's behind progressive. But the question is what you define as being forward, and if you're going to be moving forward, what are you leaving behind? So progressivism is a spectrum. You've got some people on the spectrum, Karl Marx is the classic example, who thought everything in the past was rubbish, so you had to demolish everything in the past and build again. Now, that's the most radical form of moving forward. There have been progressives who've been less radical than that. They've just said, where we've come to is OK, but it's not good enough and we have to make bigger changes. Those progressive voices, for example, in the Democratic Party in the United States, seem to be drowned out or fading away in some way. And it's the more radical, we have to scrap everything, everything is wrong. So this is where pulling down statues comes from. The idea that the reason we're going ahead is because everything behind us is appalling. That's where progressivism as a political word has got to, and that's dangerous. We're going to lose a lot if that becomes the most important political thinking around.
I'm still scarred by moving forward. I remember that press conference not long after Julia Gillard toppled Kevin Rudd and launched her campaign. I think it was about 3 weeks or 4 weeks later. And there was something like 30 mentions of moving forward because she had to, you know, she had to jettison the old bloke who hadn't even served a term, all that he stood for, all of his legacy.
That was desperation.
Yeah, well, it was desperation.
Wasn't it? Yes.
All right, last one for today, moderate. Now, it's used mainly as a term for the left wing of the Liberal Party, but of course we're probably old enough to remember when that left wing of the Liberal Party were called wets, but they're not wets anymore. No,
a moderate means middling. It means being in the middle. The classical concept behind moderate is the idea of the golden mean, that's not too far this way, not too far that way, the sort of thing Aristotle talks about in his Nicomachean Ethics. That sort of golden mean was what it originally meant. Now, you talked about the way words are used by politicians. You didn't mention hiding. Some words are used to hide behind, and I think moderate's become that kind of a word. Bear in mind, Bill Clinton and Tony Blair were sold to their respective publics as being moderates. In other words, we come from a progressive party, but hey, we won't frighten the horses. It'll be okay.
This is the Biden line. This is the Biden line, yes?
Yeah, right. So, in fact, although the Democrats are asking us to elect President Kamala Harris, they're hiding that fact by sticking up this cardboard cutout old man named Joe Biden in front of it and saying, I'm moderate, man, he's perfectly reasonable. When it comes to the Liberal Party, there are people who've got views which are not liberal, which don't belong to the history of the party, which don't belong to that conservative, preserving view of the party. Now, they use moderate as a hiding word, and hiding is one of the worst things that political words can ever do.
I tell you what, how good are you? I'm going to love this segment because there's so many words I want to pull apart, and they matter, you know. Words matter. Words, yes. Yep, words change the future. Kel Richards, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Right, if you've got ideas at home of words you want us to cover, get onto my Facebook page, tell us the words you want us to look into, and the master, Kel Richards, will come to it every Wednesday night.